This goes back to the question, though, about where do you think, revenue can increase within this industry? Because it has been really, I mean, it's just the fans are very reluctant to actually pay for their entertainment. And how do you solve this issue? Do you solve it by just creating another, like, is it possible even to create other revenue streams? Or you think that things haven't been explored? Because right now it's like, it feels as though in most esports that are not Valve esports, you're dealing with developer handouts that they allocate according to their own discretion, really. And then no media rights, and then sponsors that may be, as you're saying, drying up and then having effects on hiring talent within the industry.
I mean, with the exception of crypto, I don't think sponsorships will go down. I think, like maybe there'll be a category that won't be filled every year, but I think those will be, steady-ish flat, maybe marginally down depending on like which categories stay empty, because like excluding crypto. And then I think you'll just continue going up. So like over some long enough period of time, I think you just end up naturally catching up. But in the meantime, like if you can't figure out ways to generate more revenue out of the same assets, then like you have to spend less money for the same assets. And so the only way to fix that is on the cost side. If you can't get the financing, and like, it's a tough market out there. You can buy Face it at 2.5 times sales. Facebook. Like Facebook is maybe one of the best businesses in the history of the world, and that costs 2.5 times sales. Like it's a tough put for the teams that, according to Forbes, were 10 times revenue to raise money at 300% premium to what Facebook is trading at. And so, like, I just think there's going to have to be some level of pain. The level will depend a lot on team by team. Like, some will take more drastic measures than others. Like, some will be better capitalized already because they raised money more recently, or they raised more money recently than some of the others. And so, like, that's going to be a piece of it. And then also, like, there's just going to be a lot of consolidation. Like, on the tournament organizer side, I've made for a long time the point. Now, like, I'm not saying ESL is fixing it, but they're kind of accidentally ending in that place. But like, if you had like 2 big tournament organizers that had duopoly instead of, one monopoly and a million small ones, like you could have 2 cost bases doing like, for Counter-Strike, call it like, I don't know, like 100 events a year combined, including like the second tier events that are being hosted. And so at that point, if those events are marginally profitable, like you're probably making money. The part where it becomes problematic is, like, I don't know how many 100 employees ESL has. Like, I remember Duncan told me this story from like 2009, 2010, when he went to the ESL offices to do like an IEM Shanghai event. And like he'd go there and like he'd do the cast and he'd see like half the office playing games, and like that would go on for a couple of days. And then like finally he'd be like, "What do you guys do?" And they're like, "Well, like, we're like, the event's like done, we're kind of here, and then there's the next events in like October, so now we're just like, we're playing games." And he's like, "Well, what are you doing here?" And I'm sure that's like that's a caricature. Like, I'm sure it's not actually like that anywhere, but like there's only so many people that you need to host one of these events. And like, if there's many of these TOs that host like 3 events a year, like many of those people are, I'm not saying they're doing nothing, I'm sure they're doing things, but they're not doing things that directly generate revenue. And like in an industry that needs revenue generation, like that's maybe an issue.
But it is,
or it's a luxury, rather. It's a luxury that
I'm saying this as a purely abstract statement, so no one got crazy. But that's one area I think a market correction is welcome in esports. Is, mate, the amount of media and team org and game dev companies where when you look at the internal structure, you're like, bro, there's about like 10 times more execs than could do any of these jobs. Like, who the fuck are these? Like, is that someone's cousins just on like a 400k salary? What the hell is this? Like, the amount of times where, as you're saying, like, look, some of those people aren't generating anything. They're just in an office waiting for an email going, meeting at 4 instead of 6. I am playing Words with Friends. Like, that's mad. And then the joke is, in the outside of the industry where we don't know the behind the scenes, we're all going mad like, why are they paying that player 21,000 instead of 20? It's like, we're also myopically out of fucking touch with the industry. It's mental. Like, the joke I'll just throw in there is, I think the biggest indictment of esports ever is what you just referenced earlier, Richard, which is the website domain esports.com logically should be one of the most fucking sought after domains ever, and it is a perennial fucking scam honeypot for the most douchebag shithead try to like get rich quick. I am definitely a scam business every time. Like the joke is the current people haven't even yet been exposed to be a scam. They're just stealing everyone's content. That's like the whole industry in a fucking nutshell. Esports.com is always a scam, for fuck's sake.
By the way, quick comment on something that I said earlier. Two other places where like people who just like want to get into esports and like have a way of raising a bit of money always go into is, first one we said was teams. Second is hosting events. And the third one is media. Because again, zero barriers of entry.
I also do love as well, and
all three.
I'll always reference this till the end of time now. The joke is the shit line that was the equivalent of the elevator pitch that they used to always say for media companies in esports was, we're going to be the ESPN of esports. And it's like, even ESPN esports didn't work, you fucking idiots. Why is this industry so trash? It's so bad.
Well, the thing about the ESPN is the irony of the ESPN esports was that they weren't even the ESPN of esports. They didn't do the things that ESPN does that causes ESPN to be successful. I mean, it's just mind-boggling to me. So I think somebody can still be the ESPN of esports if they do it according to the real ESPN business model.
By the way, HLTV's financials before they got bought are public. Like that was always a profitable company. Like that actually, like you can do it. But
paying a bunch of people from the Balkans $4 a month to ban Indian people for saying racially insensitive things about Brazilians while having a giant cover over ad that if you accidentally click any spare pixel takes you to a gambling website that will never be verified, and actually has a guy who looks like the devil with a Monopoly monocle going, "Get rich quick, kids! Get rich quick!" Like that's almost so bad a caricature. It's like the fucking that movie of like Pinocchio when I was a kid, and they're taking all those like boys to the island. Like that's what that website was like. So yeah, I agree, Tommy. I bet it was profitable at the fucking ass, mate.
So two caveats. One, some questionable advertising on that website. Not the. They don't have the progressives of advertising covered on that website. And then two, and this is the thing that nobody wants to hear, but if most of your audience is not from like the high CPM Western countries like the UK, the US, Canada, Australia, whatever, then like maybe your cost base also just like can't be from those countries. Like if you're a Counter-Strike business and most of your audience comes from, you know, the ex-CIS region, then like probably you're monetizing at a rate, you know, that those users monetize, and therefore you're making money at that rate, and you probably also have to pay out money in that rate. Sure. And that's the piece that I think, like, you know, people are reluctant to kind of accept. It's like a short-term reality in some of these games, and like, you know, some games have different kind of geographic splits, but for Counter-Strike in particular, like, you look at how much audience like the Brazilian stream draws every single time, like every major event, like how much the Russian streams draw, like what the audience is for the Navi game or the Furia game. Like that's where the audience is for Counter-Strike. And so like, it's not shocking to me that it's really hard for American organizations to do well in Counter-Strike because the salaries are just so incredibly high.
Mm-hmm. I think as well, one of the other issues we've got is like, I like, and this goes right back to the roots of esports. I think we were just built on rotten foundations to begin with, and we've never gone back and corrected it because we've always been built on the premise that what will succeed is if we emulate a traditional sports model. But, you know, there's loads of caveats with that. You know, I've talked a lot about like, one of my frustrations with the VC guys is they come in, they drop like 60 mil, and then they go in all the press releases, they say this, like what Duncan was talking about earlier, this is like being in, you know, like the baseball, you know, we get to have a baseball franchise before baseball's big. And it's like, did you see all the shit baseball went through historically? Like all the nightmare it took to be the product MLB is now. And by the way, that's a failing product. I mean, they're still trying to figure out, you know, and that's like 200 years, you know, stewing away. But like we try and copy the NFL. You know, NFL had a tax exemption status for 2015, no esports, or until 2015, no esports org is ever going to have. The way they make money, it's all broadcast deal relevant, or, you know, now the big thing is obviously naming rights of a stadium. We don't even have stadiums. We never could have a stadium. Can you imagine an esports org trying to have a stadium, and every time one of its teams played, they sell the tickets to the fans who go there? Like, it was why I had to laugh about the Overwatch model. It's like when they started talking about the homestand model and people traveling, you know, from like Shanghai and Seoul to play people in LA one week and then traveling to Paris and London the next.
That was the original model, if people don't know.
Yeah.
They've changed their mind now, but before it was really going to be like NFL, but with the whole world.
Yes,
traveling home and away games, for real.
Now, keep in mind, in the NFL, like, if you have to be one of the London games, you know, it's like, really? It's why you don't, you know, and it's done on a rotational basis. And it was just not sustainable. And it's like, there are too many people that are pulling the levers on the direction esports goes that are just living a fucking sports fantasy. They're just incompetent morons. They're fucking nerds that like are never going to run a sports franchise, never going to be close. They're never going to be courtside. But here's esports, so let's try and make it this thing. We've had a massive insecurity complex in everything we've done in esports. Never felt comfortable in our own skin. That's why you had dickheads when we first started doing esports commentary in fucking tuxedos for an event with 40 people in the stands. It's fucking embarrassing. I had more people at my last barbecue, and you're dressed
That's why Duncan killed Counter-Strike at those early majors when he was wearing the Kobe jersey.
Yeah.
But Counter-Strike could never recover.
That's 2013. And do you remember the abuse he got for doing that? Well, totally disrespecting it. What about the shirt and tie? Like, it's
I had the stash
games.
that also killed Counter-Strike because I was so into CSGO.
The November stash, that was right, yeah.
So, you know, for me, I think one of the fundamental problems is, like, we're never going to fix the industry until we go back to basics and be like, what even is esports? It's the fundamental question. Like, what even is it? Because people have very radically different ideas, and those ideas lead to the way that we produce a product that we then monetize. And it's built on the rotten foundations, and that's why it's like fruit of the poisonous tree. Like,
one thing I definitely agree with that I'd just like to add on there is, that's why, to me, this is why I think I have a different perspective on the industry. Like, I think the whole sports thing's been and gone. Like you say, even sports themselves, by the way, are a dying form of media, and they're constantly, desperately, hence
they're
why
trying to get into our shit.
Yeah, hence why the joke is the NFL's trying to bring a ninja into their shit, for fuck's sake. That's how bad things are there. So I would say is, I view it more as an entertainment product, and right now, that's the only way you make money anyway. I think it's more like WWE to me than an actual, like, sport, you know. What were you going to say, Tommy?
And actually, you know, WWE looks like it's going to be following in the footsteps of esports, because the rumors are now that the Saudi government's going to own that too.
I've been on the cards for years.
So, I mean, first of all, by the way, like, all of this has been entertainment the whole time. It's just that not like everybody accepted it. Like, there is no like pure competition, all that stuff. Like, it's great, but like, really, like, if people aren't watching, like, it doesn't matter.
By the way, I'll tell you a stat and an example that shows that it's a waste of time spinning our wheels talking like it's a sport. You remember in the online era, we were still doing Flashpoint, the beginning of 2021, where they had the IM Katowice, where it was the best possible news if you're a CS fan, because Gambit and Virtus Pro made the final, these up-and-coming teams, and nobody fucking watched because it wasn't Na'Vi. That just showed me, like, this isn't a sport, dude. Like, in a sport, that should be like the Miracle on Ice or something. This is like if no one watched it because it was the Miracle on Ice. Like, what the fuck? Like, that's how bad fucking the contrast between the sporting angle and making money and the media angle is ridiculous. Like, the joke I've said for the last 2 years since that exact tournament is the best actual game you could ever get is Na'Vi versus the biggest Brazilian team of that time. That is, like, if you could actually WWE rig your version of, like, fucking SummerSlam, so that's the title match, that's how you get the most views. It's not by having a really good tournament.
Did you see those blast groups they just announced? Yeah, of course they're jury rigging everything.
That's all it is. Yeah, that's all it is now.
So what I was going to say is, well, first of all, like, everything is entertainment, obviously. Like, if it's not entertaining, I'm not watching. Like, I don't think the Mavs are the best team in the NBA. I just think Doncic is the most fun player to watch in the NBA. And so, like, I'll watch his games, even if whether they're good or bad, because I just think he's unbelievable as a player. So that's entertaining to me, regardless of, like, how good his team is, which now happens to be good on the back of him. But what I was going to say to Richard is, I think most industries are probably flawed when they're first put together, and like at some point people just like find ways to fix it. I think it's probably more frustrating to this group because we all happen to have been around this particular one for a long time, and I think at least with some of these changes have, had some right views every once in a while, and that's taken longer for, some group of the industry to come along on. But I think it'll get sorted at some point. One point that I was going to make, I don't remember who said what and which one of you said that brought this to mind, is like you could easily fix the most popular game titles to be like highly profitable in the sense that like relative to the cost that you're spending, like they would be like good businesses. But the issue is that it's, typically it's not like you don't have the right structure and the right game. So like, for example, like if you only have 20 teams globally, like you do in the Overwatch League, if the game is popular enough, like you can sell that enough to make a good amount of money. The issue with Overwatch League is the viewership is not there currently and hasn't been. Like if you could have, like, for example, in the NBA, like I think the 82 game season is dumb. Like nobody cares. I watch more NFL during the NFL season because the matches matter more. And then I just switch to NBA. I think I probably like the NBA a little bit more, but the matches matter more during the NFL season. So I watch more football. CS is so diluted. It's so oversaturated with how many games there are. If you could have, I don't know, like let's just say it's like one like premier tournament a month and then like one smaller tournament for like second tier teams and like some of the other teams to qualify. Like, some simpler structure where the times when Navi plays, whichever the number 2 team is at the time, seemingly like matters more. And you only had, let's just say, 20 teams. So like all the best talent actively wanted to be on those 20 teams, and we're not diluted between the 50 teams that happen to lock up like the super promising youngster to a multi-year contract who then can't get to the best team of their country. Like the viewership would be higher, I think. Like the cost would be lower because there'd be fewer matches to generate that viewership. And there would be less competition for players, so the teams would be healthier, but they could probably still pay those players more than the current levels. The issue is that you're diluting all of this in the context of Counter-Strike to more matches, more tournaments, more teams, more players, and it's just like bleeding the same amount of revenue for more cost all across the board. I think Valorant actually has the best structure currently out of any game. I'm very curious to see how that goes. We'll see how the game's popularity develops, but like that's very encouraging to me. I'm like very optimistic about that.
What do you like about it? Because it doesn't give you the same asset to own that you would have in some of these other franchise leagues.
I think you have decent security on Valorant. It's not quite the same, but you have like decent visibility into the future. It's that you don't have the same transferability per se. Like you can't maybe sell it the same way. I'm guessing that if your whole company got sold, like the Riot might or might not approve depending on the buyer, but like
some wording that did imply that it's not like an LCS spot you can just sell to someone, or like maybe they decided or approve whatever.
Every one of these slots is subject to publisher approval, the same way like every sports team sale is subject to the league approval. But anyway, like you do have visibility and you have a fixed number of teams playing at the highest level. So like there's fixed amount of content that Riot gets to sell against, like fixed number of players that can compete. And like, while I think there's going to be a bunch of teams in the first year paying a bunch of money to teams and players who really should be playing in the VCT instead of like the qualifying teams, I assume by mid-year, the players who are obviously not going to make it this year are going to find their way to the best teams. And then like, that'll just be the Premier League with like all the best players. And I think that'll change the economics. I think the one thing that I think would be very interesting for League of Legends is if you could merge LEC and LCS.
I would love that, man.
Because then I think the challenge you have
Europeans bailing out American bullshit again. Yeah, brilliant.
Look, time for you guys to pay us back for World War II.
we did do some heavy lifting as well, Like, I do want to point that out, mate. Like, fair enough.
Just saying, you guys are lucky we stepped in.
You did deliver the Stone Cold Stunner. Like, yeah, no one's disputing that. But like, we were in that ring for 40 minutes. We were in an 8-man match,
All right. So anyway,
let's not talk about Finland's history in the Second World War. That usually gets forgotten in the history books, certainly in the Finnish history books. Rarely mentioned. No
What I'm
need
going to
to go
say
there.
is essentially in Finland in World War II is like Riot Games and how they operate their esports. You actually took an L, but you take 2 L's, spin them sideways as a W, and claim as a win. Because people don't know, they like actually like lost ground, lost people, and they were like, "We won the war." It's like, all right, well, another shot of vodka, everyone. Like, give me a break.
Well, you actually missed the worst part, arguably. Which is that Finland was like firmly on the Nazi side until it became obvious that like that was not the side to be on, and that's the part that's been like forgotten from everywhere.
It's like playing games also, you just hop from one evil side to another one when it's not efficacious anymore. Exactly.
The best part is as well, like all my mods on my Discord are all Finnish, and it's like when you know they do a great job at airbrushing it anytime anyone mentions it. You know, like World War II comes up with just Perkele, and they're just in there and they airbrush everything out of history. Good on them.
Just focus on that sniper guy, basically. The sniper guy is the best part.
Yeah, look at this guy. Look how many Germans he killed. Look how many Russians.
The Alu of his day, as it were.
Yeah, exactly.
that guy was a G.
All right.
What I love, by the way, if people don't know as well, he has the greatest, like, actual, like, caricature of what Finnish people are like as well. Because if you've ever seen, there's this guy, basically, you look it up, he's a guy who's famous for having the most recorded sniper kills in history. And someone asked him, like, a naive fucking interviewer, like, how did you do it? And he goes, like, you just practice a lot. It's like, are you fucking kidding? What? Is this a real character? Like, that's obviously not how you do it, is it? Like, you know, like, come on.
So, Tommy, do you have to get off?
Hold up.
I can spare a couple more minutes.
Okay, good.
Great. So let's talk about the LEC LCS merger that you're proposing, because this is very interesting to me.
Okay.
So I think one thing, well, currently, obviously, the challenge is that the LEC is just competitively way better. I think what makes that worse is that the US teams generally have more money, and you end up in this like weird place where, judging by some of the reported salary information and the results, the US teams are spending more money but getting worse results for it, which actually is in a weird way worse for the industry as a whole, and also in a way makes it harder for the average fan to be excited, I think, because you only see the end of the year piece at Worlds, and then like if Europe is way better, as has been the case for a couple of years now, then like the entire year, you're kind of discounting everything that's going on the other side. Even if this year happened to be the year where everything just turned and all of a sudden the LCS teams were just like miles and miles better than the LEC teams, you know, I wouldn't hold my breath, though I know nothing about League of Legends, so definitely don't listen to what I'm saying in that regard anyway. But I just think for the average fan to like be excited about it, like, as I said earlier, like you need variance. You need people to have like reasons to speculate about like who's better, like who's doing worse, like what's going to happen here. And if you only get to see how those teams match up against once a year, like I think we've seen that it's hard for people to get excited about it the same way. Like it's like like the way the average, at least the Reddit fan, you know, the fan whose comments you see seems to perceive things. It's like, you know, it's like North America's like a kind of a meme. It's like the same as in Counter-Strike. And part of it is like you just don't get enough shots against one another where like even the variants might just like give you some comfort. Like, you know,
what you're talking about is something I've told Monte on Summoning Insight many times, which is essentially the quickest version is if League of Legends had the exact same teams with the exact same strength, but they just had the Counter-Strike circuit. By now it's like Cloud9. Someone would have fucked around and won like a major from NA or like a fight. Like it's just because, as you say, the variance and the number of chances would be so high. It would just happen eventually. Whereas like at the moment, essentially you have, like you say, one shot, right? It's once per year. And then they're trying to fit through the eye of a needle on that.
Yeah, and by the way, like I think obviously for any game where Asian teams are so dominant, like it's just going to be really hard to sell that in the West, because you know it's just like you're never going to get like the same kind of coverage of those players. Like, you know, you're not going to get the same kind of interviews, like commentary, like. You're not going to get like, you know, you might get something translated, but it's just like not the same as somebody making a comment on a live stream before the game, after the game, etc. And so like, I think it's hard for fans to get excited about it the same way. So I guess like that's one caveat that is there for League of Legends in particular, is that like Asia just happens to be so much stronger. And for the West, it's just, you know, you just don't get the same kind of coverage. But to go back to the, not my idea, by the way. There's many other people who have had this idea before.
Sure. It is a good idea, I think.
Yeah, but I think it would be interesting. Like, I just think it would be better for everybody. Like the quid pro quo would be that I I think the North American teams make more centrally generated revenue because there's just like more media rights revenue, more sponsorship revenue, et cetera, in North America. And so like you would kind of be trading the better teams for but lower revenue into like today worse competition, whatever, but more resources, which makes competition for players tougher in that context, but more revenue. Like I just think.
By the way, this is essentially a discussion that we had over the last couple of years, that Monte had his own ESL Facebook experience, which was the reason why Monte, sadly, he made the mistake, you know this, Richard, when all that stuff about the Super League was happening in European football, which, by the way, is probably by consensus the least popular, like, possible decision ever made in the history of European sports. Monte was trying to do the abstract point of like, but wouldn't it be great to have a giant Super League? So the problem is, Tommy's also on the same train. If you know this one, Tommy's on the same train. He also agrees if you had like a Super League that would be the best. But remember, fans, we're not talking about. Yeah, but the problem is, we're not talking about the literal Super League. We mean for esports. We don't mean Stoke football can't play anymore or whatever, you know.
Okay, because I liked the Super League for football.
I did too. Who cares about the shitty local football teams? Nobody. I might watch football if we got the Super League. I don't give a shit about the fourth best Spanish team or the seventh best Italian team. I will never watch those teams play.
Exactly. That was my point. I was like, maybe I would actually watch this sport in this case.
Yeah, and then let's fast forward 50 years when the Super League has like 6 teams that dominate at the top and actually really good reserves, and they go, hey, we should break away and make our own Super League. And then,
I'm down, man.
Yeah, and you'll be there as an old man going, just think about it. Only the best teams would play.
Exactly. Yeah.
Ecosystems. Who needs that?
Unfortunately, I'm willing to go to the nth degree on this one. So.
Yeah, I know. Like, fuck's sake.
But the point is, actually, as you can see, the joke is that is what people in League of Legends essentially want, Tommy. Like, if people don't know, I've made this point many times. What really showed me that like the business side doesn't make sense to the same degree in Europe was when G2 was the #1 European League of Legends team and they wanted to apply to be in the fucking NA franchising and just give it all up and go over like that's the fucking canary in the coal mine right there, guys.
Well, it's also that what I want is not only the combination of LCS and LEC. I want a consolidation of all leagues into like a 20-team actual like global league, because I do think that's
the sorry to cut you off, Monte, but that was the thing that I was going to say right before, which is that I just think the one benefit that esports has over traditional sports is that it's digital and like nobody is a fan of like whatever shitty teams from their hometown. Like I have a hockey team from my hometown that I like still kind of follow because I just like grew up going to the games with my dad. Like you don't have that, and so why try to force it to be about like this region, that region? Just like put the best teams together. Like let people root for those best teams because they are not tied to whatever. Like you actually do get a chance at a reset that allows you to do that.
Oh, this is an area where fans are lost though as well, because fans famously, the LCS is the best example ever of this. Every year, LCS fans gaslight their own players in NA and the team orgs in NA that all they really want is to cheer for North America and that they just want North American talent and play. And then the joke is at the end, they just wanted what you're talking about. What they really want, Tommy, for real, is like a Team Liquid super team, but that just wins though. That's all they really want. They don't give a fuck if anyone's from North America in the team. If you just said, which do you want, like this player from your country? I mean, by the way, that doesn't. There's another thing we can stop right now. Geolocation doesn't work for continents, you fucking dickheads. Like, as Tommy just said there, he didn't go, anyone who's Finnish who plays hockey, I just support them. He said his hometown. You're doing it like NA. Like, you can't be like, I'm from NA geolocated. Like, what? Does that third of the world? What are you talking about? Like, so that's why I actually think even fans buy into the sort of sports way of framing it when that's not what they want. What fans want is, they just want someone who's in the LCS league to have a chance versus LCK. They don't really care who's on the team.
Yeah, I don't think people care who's on the team. I think that team is their region. This is going to be an unpopular opinion, but my view actually, when the old MIBR team wanted to pick up like the couple of American players, so first Dewey, then Tarek, and then they decided that like, no, they needed to go back to Brazil. I said at the time that there's no fucking way that they should ever be allowed to go back to Brazilian, because like now you've actually opened the door to just building MIBR to be in something like, not to be taken literally, but you know, like something like FC Barcelona. Like people root for it and they just assume that they'll just field the best players. Like some of them will hopefully be Spanish always, and like hopefully some of the best ones will be Spanish, but they just want that team to be represented by the best available players. And like what I said is, if you close the door on that once, like under this core, you'll never be able to do it again because nobody's ever joining again. And I just thought like you're limiting the player pool too much. And like, I think in hindsight, like, the MIBR brand has obviously done well. So like maybe we were better off doing it this way with the new focus of the brand being like fully Brazilian. But if you think about the player pool, like the point that some of us made, like probably like 7 years ago now, that like eventually this was all going to be international just because of like how much better the player pool will be and getting all the fits in your teams. Like that was so obvious. Like how would you ever, like you have to be so lucky in your country to always get the best players for every position to be able to compete with a team that has marginally worse comms in an era where everybody speaks English in their games every single day from the time they're like 14 or 15 and have like that entire player pool to compete against. Like it's just such an advantage.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.